Yeah, a lot of teachers get burnt out. A lot of teachers are they face the consequences of this on a daily basis, and then they cannot. It's too late to do anything about it, and people end up in therapy. People end up leaving their jobs, and retiring early, and so on. Um so this is a highly neglected field, and which is why it became so necessary to make a special day for it. So in this week itself, we had a self care day, and coincidentally, we had decided a week back that we will be discussing this topic this Sunday. So, for those who have joined now, we were just discussing what we do for self care, what is our understanding of self care, and how do we involve ourselves, or do we involve ourselves in self care every now and then. So, you can write your responses in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and give your responses. So we had a few responses. There was reading, we had yoga, exercise, keeping calm. So yeah, so as and when you feel like, you can add in the responses. So I usually involve myself in a few of these activities. I involve myself in a few other activities which I'll be discussing very soon. Um, One of the examples is photography, and the picture that you saw on the cover is actually clicked by me during one of our forest visits. So that is the first thing actually which popped in my mind when I decided that we should be sharing self care. So I wanted to select a picture. I usually don't share my photographs in these presentations, but this picture clicked like figuratively. It clicked the moment I thought about self care. So I thought I'll share this with you all. So this is the one. So this we were on one of our trails for looking for dragonflies, and during this, at one point of time, I saw one brown patch on a green stem. So I grew curious, and I focused my camera on it. I found out that it's a frog that was sleeping on a branch in that angle, like vertically. And looking at the frog, the way it was sitting, and the minutes passed, and like half an hour, 1 hour, we came back, it was still there. And it kind of made me realize, eventually it did go away after it woke up, but then it kind of made me realize that this is what it means to be mindful. This is what it means to be within oneself, so to speak. And self care has a lot of grounding, has a lot of mindfulness involved in it. It has a lot of awareness involved in it. And as it says self, so there has to be a lot of awareness, there has to be a lot of mindfulness with respect to oneself. So this is what we'll be discussing today, loosely, more or less. And I do welcome any inputs, comments, questions during the session. Um if you want to unmute yourself and say something, you can. We'll be going through this one by one, and I'm sure all of you would have either experienced this at some point of time or have some experience to share during this discussion. So we discuss in brief what is self-care or our understanding of self-care. We'll also be looking at what is not self-care, which is usually branded as self-care, but it is not. And what is it on a substance level? Like if you study it from a medical point of view or from something that is tangible, something that you can experience or feel. And then modern ways or things that have recently gained ground or have become popular. Um, then we'll be looking at self-care, where which is social and progressive. So self-care doesn't necessarily have to be just by yourself, like uh, physically. You can be with other people also. And what is important? So this is when I thought about this, I was thinking what I should share, because this is a topic which a lot of people have many different opinions about. But I wanted to take a look at if you look at the end result of self care. What do you think should happen once you practice self care? How should it affect you? What should you experience? What should you feel? Oh, okay. So I asked when we when we practice self care, how do you feel, and what is the impact and effect of self care?
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you be a bit louder?
Yes, yes. No, I was saying like a basic, if you do self-care, you feel rejuvenated. I mean, your energy gets spent and so you feel frazzled. So good self-care, at least you should feel like you've got your energy back and some equilibrium. And also just like hopefully mentally cut off from everything that you've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think that's just like a very basic thing.
Okay. Would anyone else like to add to that? What do you experience when you practice self care, and how does it affect you? Okay, we feel a sense of fulfillment. So yes, that is a major part of what self care is, as I'll be sharing very soon. So um, I managed to like segregate it in three very broad aspects of the experience of self care to help us understand what is and what is not self care. So the first thing is that it has to be holistic. That is, it has to cater to, or it has to engage more parts of your being. You should be able to relate to it physically, emotionally, um, intellectually, and any other fields like spiritually and philosophically, whatever. Like it has to be based on your principles, your understanding of life. So it has to be holistic. Another aspect that I thought is important is it has to be inclusive. So self care doesn't necessarily mean what you see on Instagram. You know, like the mountains are calling me, and you go and you leave everything behind, and then just spend a few days in the mountains. So that is not exactly self care. It can be with people. It doesn't necessarily have to be alone. Um, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a way where you become inaccessible, nor do you need to indulge in something that is inaccessible to you normally. So again, taking the same example about the mountains are calling me thing, um, to go into a zone which is not normally yours doesn't necessarily mean self-care. Yes, we need to take care of our needs. That is the most important aspect of self care. So, we can be with people, we can be with family, we can be with society, community. But yes, if you do find a certain group or a certain collection of people draining, like emotionally draining, physically draining is a different matter, emotionally draining, especially. Then it is best if you do these activities with another group of people. So, it whatever self-care you are indulging in, it can be very accessible to you. You don't necessarily have to change your entire schedule and take a vacation to practice self-care. It can be something just around you. And again, fulfilling, it has to be very fulfilling. So it can be fulfilling only if it engages your awareness, it makes you feel grounded, and whatever you involve in is progressive. So we'll discuss what do we mean by progressive a bit more in detail in the next slide when we discuss what is not self-care. So a few basic activities which we can all find time for, and we can definitely involve and engage ourselves in. One is grounding. So grounding is very simple. For example, even as we are sitting, we are here together on this platform. Grounding would mean being aware of where your feet are, how you are sitting, and what senses are being engaged. What does the air feel like around you? Um, how is the light around you? What do you smell? So things that are physically around you, being one with them and experiencing them to the fullest. Grounding doesn't just mean focus; it means drawing your attention to the physical things around you. Around you, yeah. So it can be the temperature of the air. It can be whatever you smell, whatever you hear, and how you are sitting. What are you touching? Everything. So even in counseling and therapy, um, it this is practiced in many ways, but one of them is this: if you are able to feel your feet, feel the points of your feet, how many points of your feet are actually touching the ground. So, for example, if you have your big toe, the joint that is close to your big toe, and the outside seam and the heel. If these 3 points are touching the ground, can you feel the three of them individually? Can you wiggle your toes and feel each and every toe individually? So, all these are ways of grounding. If you are touching something with your hand, what can you feel? Is it smooth? Is it rough? How much of your finger is actually touching whatever you are touching? Smell something pungent, if you smell something sweet, um, what does it mean? That sensation of it being sweet or the sensation of it being pungent, how do you feel pungent so that you can recognize it as a pungent smell? So, all this comes in grounding. Earthing is something that has gained popularity nowadays in terms of words. Like, this word is very commonly used nowadays or is gaining popularity nowadays. So, earthing is basically touching your hands and feet on the ground, and not tiles but mud, actual ground, like the soil and everything. So, if you sit on the ground, that is grounding. If you spend time playing some games where your hands and feet need to touch the ground, that is grounding. Walking barefoot on soil is sorry, not grounding, earthing. um, Being in the forest where you let your feet touch the grass, walking in gardens where your feet touch the grass. So all this is grounding, where you actually feel the earth. Sorry, earthing. I tend to confuse both of them, uh, because earthing is actually a very specific part of grounding, so to speak. So that is earthing, where you are trying to feel, you're trying to experience the earth. Now, coming to anchoring. So now anchoring is a bit different, and it is something that needs to be reinforced. So it's a practice. So anchoring is if you have a certain action or a tendency, like some people have a tendency to crack their knuckles, some people have a tendency to um flare their nose. Some people have a tendency to pull their ear. Some people have a tendency to hold their wrist or whatever. If you observe some tendency within you, something that you do very often, you do a brief meditation, you focus on all the good things in life, all the positive things in life, all the things that you want more of, things that have already happened and you want more of. Now, meditate on these activities, go into that time zone, feel what it felt like at that time, who were around you, what did it feel like, what was the environment like. Try to remember uh, like whatever aspects, as much in detail as possible. And then, after you do that, you feel, or you do that behavior that you tend to do often, like cracking your knuckles or your like holding your wrist or all these things. You involve yourself in this, and again remember that memory and feel this whatever you are doing, and then gradually open your eyes. So, for example, if you take 5 minutes and close your eyes. Remember the incidents that really make you happy. Remember the incidents that you want more of in your life. And as you do this, focus on them, focus what it feels like, focus on who was around you, focus on the environment, and then gradually pick up on the action that you do quite often, like cracking your knuckles or touching your knees or rotating your wrist or whatever. And then gradually open your eyes. So, the more you do this, those memories become attached with whatever action you are involved in. And then when you feel that at one point of time things are getting out of hand, you are getting frustrated, you are losing your grounding, so to speak, then you can practice anchoring, you can practice that action, and it will bring you back to your state, to your ground state. So this is what is anchoring. I hope it was understood. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. So once again, if you do have any questions, do post them in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask them. So that was anchoring. Now moving to journaling. Now journaling, there are many different ways to journal. Um, if you are a writer, like if you like writing, then obviously this should be something not very difficult for you. If you are not a writer, if you feel that you do not have writing skills, you don't know what to write in a journal and so on, make three basic questions. So missed the last bit of anchoring. Yeah, so I just repeated um, what I was discussing. So you just need to remember the incidents in detail, as much detail as possible, and then involve yourself in the activity or the tendency that you have, like cracking knuckles or rotating your wrist or touching your knees or your nose or whatever, touching your head, back of your head. So that activity which you do quite often, quite frequently, you are anchoring it to the memories which you have, with the positive memories that you have, positive experiences that you have. So the more you do this, the more frequently you do this, the more strong that bond will become between the tendency or the action that you involve yourself in, and the positive memories that you uh, are focusing on. And then at a time when you are getting stressed, at a time when you feel like you are losing yourself, at that time when you do that activity or engage in that tendency that you have, you will feel the effects of the positive memory. You feel the effects of that incident, and that will help you bring you back to the ground state. Then coming to journaling, as I said, if you are not much of a writer, you don't need to worry about it. Just design three questions which, when you answer, give you a perspective of how you spent your day, what were your experiences, and a few things that you can be grateful for, a few things that you feel thankful for. So even the few, if you feel you need a number, so it has to be a fixed number. So like say three things to be grateful for. So when you say three things, you have to write three things. There will be some days when you just don't feel like writing. Maybe reflect on to-do lists. Could you elaborate this, please? Okay, reflect on to-do
Yeah,
lists.
hello, hello. Sorry. Hi. Yeah. Yeah. What I understand is that, like supposing we get up in the morning thinking we have to do this and that. And maybe at some point during the day, once we've done it or at the end of the day, we kind of reflect that, we had planned it and, just reflect on it, whether how it went or what needs to be still done or something like that.
So yes, this is also something that you can put as one of the questions, or if you want to write exclusively about this, you can write about this. But the next part, that is the gratitude journal. This has more to do with the three questions that I was talking about. So if you feel you cannot involve yourself in free writing, like you feel that you cannot write too much by yourself, at least do this. and this is something that you will need a maximum of like 5-10 minutes or something. So you can maybe get up before everyone else, or take some time in the afternoon, or take some time in the evening, night, whenever. Just take 5-10 minutes. Nights are usually best because you have the whole day to think about, or early morning. So that also works. So, gratitude journal is about that. What are you grateful for throughout the day? It can be as simple as the smile on a friend's or a child's face, or it can be as profound as some epiphany that you must have had, some life-changing thought that you must have had through the day. Um, so that is the gratitude journal. Now, meditation and mindfulness, these two are usually used interchangeably. They don't have to be necessarily the same. It depends on your understanding of the meditation, the meaning of the word meditation. So, as we had discussed during one of our talks, meditation is actually, it comes from the word meditari, which means to contemplate. So, think loosely about, think unegoistically about, like without yourself in the picture. So, very neutrally. Um, and the way we use it nowadays is no thoughts, like thoughtless state and so on. Mindfulness, on the other hand, is whatever you are doing, whether you are meditating, whether you are doing yoga, whether you are cooking or working or teaching or whatever, you are doing it mindfully. You are aware of the changes that are happening within you. You are aware of what you are touching, feeling, seeing, smelling, everything. So, this is mindfulness. So mindfulness can be even in walking, like if you're walking in a park or something like that, being aware of the points on which you are resting your feet every time your foot touches the ground. You are being aware of whether you are walking straight, whether your back is straight, how your hands move, how your shoulders move, and where you are looking, whether you are looking down, whether you're looking up or eye level. So all this comes in mindfulness. Um, Self
Uh,
talk.
ex- Excuse me,
Yes, yes.
sir. With mindfulness, as you said that whatever you're doing, you're feeling it.
Hmm.
So means you're aware of that. So will it affect our feelings also? Like suppose I'm going to step something and I'm feeling that I'm stepping somewhere. So that anxiousness or anxiety or something or fear like that also will come in that,
Yes. So
or we
that
have to just enjoy.
that does very much come in that. Okay, so one misconception which we'll be discussing in the next slide is self care doesn't necessarily have to be a pleasurable feeling. There are times when self care has to be a very grounding feeling. It has to be something that you are very much in touch with. So, as you very rightly pointed out, if you're walking and if you're about to step on a snail or something like that, the anxiety, the fear that you feel inside, if you spend time to study that feeling, you avoid stepping on the snail, take the next step, and then you feel what you felt. If you feel that your heart is racing, if you feel that your blood is pumping, um, your breath rate has increased. So, all these things you need to grow aware of. So,
Okay,
does that
okay.
answer it?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome. So, that is how mindfulness works. Now, coming to self talk and self counseling. So, now this is not something that I can talk about at length, because it's best if you approach a therapist or a counselor or psychologist about this to get more details. But in short, this is how you wish you would be spoken to. So if you wish someone speaks to you like a father, like a brother, like a friend, like a guide, like a mentor, try speaking to yourself in that way. Use those kind of words, use that kind of a language, use that kind of a personality. If you feel that you need someone who keeps you on track if you feel that your issues, your frustration is not because of lack of freedom, but it is because of too much of freedom and too much of like insecurity and lack of guidance, so to speak. So in that case, this voice will not be someone who keeps comforting you. This voice will be someone who questions you, who inquires what you are doing. Does it seem significant at this moment? Whatever it is that you are doing today, how will it impact your life? So be very clear on how you wish to be spoken to and speak to yourself in that manner. So if so a lot of times what happens is, if someone is depressed, uh, like proper clinical depression, people tend to try to support that person by saying, life is not all that bad, and see how things are so good and so on, and that actually pushes them deeper into the shell. This is because they don't, most of them, I am not saying all of them, but most of them, they are not depressed because they think life is bad. They are depressed because they feel they are worthless in contributing to its goodness. So if you need to speak to them, they have to learn to understand that it is okay to feel depressed, it is okay to feel bad, it is okay to feel hopeless, but it is not okay to stay there all the time. So uh, trying to inquire into why you are feeling like that, and trying to inquire into what you can do to get out of it by yourself, that is an example of a self talk. So for example, if suppose I am feeling depressed and I feel that I have lost all purpose in life, trying to talk to myself and tell myself that it's okay that I am feeling like this, it's okay that I feel that I feel whatever I'm feeling right now, and I need to find out, I need to figure out how to come out of it. First of all, I need to come to grounds with whether or not it is something that I want to come out of. And if I usually the first time you ask yourself, the answer is no, I'm okay feeling like this. Once that stage is reached, that acceptance is reached, then you can start working on um, how and when do you want to get out of it. So mentoring yourself in that way, guiding yourself in that way, and coming to terms with that process. When you say coming out of it, doesn't mean that you reject it. It just means that facing it as an incident in your life, as an experience in your life, and then working on resolving it. If I don't feel good, why don't I feel good? If I am feeling worthless, why am I feeling worthless? So that is how a lot of times people even find their own purpose. People find out what they want to do, at least for the moment. So that helps. So self talk and self counseling is when you speak to yourself how you wish you had been spoken to or should be spoken to. So this is more or less what self care is. Now, what is not self care? So things like things which we commonly misunderstand as being self-care, things like taking a Sunday off and just sleeping the whole day. But if we don't know how to answer our doubts, it is very rare that you don't have answers at all. And if you are in that state, you at least have answers to the question on how can I find answers. So, for example, if I'm feeling purposeless, now if I think about this way, why am I feeling purposeless? So the hard fact is I'm feeling purposeless because whatever I'm doing doesn't seem to be contributing where I wanted to contribute. Whatever it is that I'm doing isn't fulfilling. Whatever I'm doing doesn't seem to be making an impact. It doesn't seem to be making the world a better place. And if that is the case, then maybe I should either change what I do or at least involve myself in these things once in a while, which is all the more reason why these things are not self-care. So for example, the the feel good thing. So when I say that feeling good or things that make you feel good for the time being are not self-care. So things like just taking the Sunday off and sleeping the entire day, that is not self-care, because by the end of it you are going to be feeling even more depressed, that you wasted the whole day, you didn't do anything. You feel more low, you feel even more depressed, because somewhere you feel that this time is gone, and where you could have done something as simple as I don't know, if you wanted to read a book since a long time and you lost this opportunity, you could have read at least 10 pages, 15 pages, maybe the whole book. You could have spent that time, but just because you had decided Saturday night that Sunday I'm going to sleep the whole day, that is why now you are at the end of the the sleeping process on Sunday. First of all, your sleep cycle is disturbed, and the other thing is that whatever you wanted to indulge yourself in, you didn't. Something that you could have found productive for yourself, for your own growth, which would have made you feel not just better but also more engaged, energized, and real and grounded.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. In fact, I just experienced something like this because from 9 to 11, I was with some underprivileged children having a session. And I was in transition when you came online. And I was doing feedback with the parent of the child because she was not talking. And I missed bit of your session. So I know I did something, I had to make a choice whether I just not talk to the parent or listen to you. But I took a decision and I feel really fulfilled that I rounded off that topic, and then I know I can always hear your recording again and hear what I missed, Then in between, I've been driving home, so I've been listening in the car. So this is where I feel ki if you, it was my choice, So I think this point is very nice what you're saying, Yeah.
Yeah, so things that you can not put off, but then this is going to be available later. So this is also very important distinction: putting off something and knowing that it is going to be available later. So knowing that that it is going to be available later means prioritizing, and putting off something means we'll do it some other time. So when you say some other time, it means that there is no definite answer for that. It means that you are just putting it off. But on the other hand, when you are prioritizing something, that this is lower on priority, which means this will happen then. Like you have a time frame for it. So this is also a part of self care when you understand your priorities. So yeah, so this is the difference between what is self care and what is not self care. Then the next is it is not a luxury. This I mean in both ways. One is when you say luxury is something that is expensive, something that is pricey, something that you normally wouldn't do but want to do someday. That is luxury. The other luxury is something that you don't have time for, and if you do get time for it, then it is luxurious to you. So both of them are not self-care. If you feel that self-care is something that involves a lot of time and needs a lot of input from you and so on, so that is not self-care. Um, it is something that can be engaging, and it is something that can be um, done every day, 5 minutes every day, 10 minutes every day. It can be done something on a weekly basis. It is very much accessible and very much practical. So if you think that there is this place where you get a haircut for 800 rupees, and I don't normally what do you say, afford it. I can't normally afford it, but then today let's take a break and do it anyways. So if you spend those 800 rupees, 1000 rupees for that haircut, one day you are going to be feeling bad after that. Just give me a second, please. There is somebody at the door, so I need to take a minute to just open it. Excuse me. Okay, and I'm back. So, as I was saying, it is not something like it doesn't have to be something very special and something that you cannot do every day and so on. Um Vacations are good, going climbing mountains, trekking, and so on is very good, but they don't necessarily come in self care. So, it needs to be something accessible and something practical. Now, what else is not self care is it's not optional. If you feel that it's okay if I don't do this, or it's okay if I don't involve myself in self-care, I am happy, why do I need to practice self-care? It is not optional. Self-care is something that maybe you are happy because you are practicing self-care, but on the whole it is not optional. You need to and you have to involve yourself in self-care every now and then, hopefully regularly, preferably regularly. So, why does self care work, and what does it look like on a very substance level, like medical level or on an experiential level? So, first of all, we need to take a look at the chemicals that drive this feeling of self care, so to speak. So we have the four primary happiness chemicals, which is endorphin, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. And we have the fifth fear chemical, which is cortisol. So endorphins. So these things are something that I've spoken about quite a few times, but then it is very much pertinent here. It is very much important to be discussed here. So endorphins are pain relieving chemicals. They what happens if we follow self care and those we relate with daily don't? Um, yeah, so you will be happy and they won't. So I think that is the general gist I can give you. But if so, as I said, that self care doesn't have to be very special. Doesn't have to be very like it doesn't have to feel like self care. Um, you could, as a group, get involved in some activities which are self care. So we will be discussing those kind of activities also, and these activities are things that sometimes we do daily. But if we just draw a little bit of focus, a little bit of effort in them, involvement in them, it makes it more like self care. So, in fact, one of them is on this slide. So we'll just go through this and then come to that. So endorphin is the pain relieving chemical, and whatever pain has been relieved, the excess endorphin gives you a high, gives you happiness. Dopamine is a targeting chemical. If you have an aim, a goal, a target, some purpose in life, that gives you a rush of dopamine. So even very simple things, as we were talking about to-do lists, so even ticking things on a to-do list gives you a dopamine. And sometimes it so happens that when you need dopamine, and or when you are feeling down, and if you just list a series of tasks that you have already accomplished in a day, You list all of them and you keep ticking all of them. Even that makes you happy. So that is how we can involve the effects of dopamine. Then serotonin is the pride chemical and oxytocin is the family chemical. So now endorphins can be engaged by very simple activities like exercising, laughter therapy, and drumming, and so on. Wherever physical effort is involved, that is where endorphin can be engaged. Dopamine is when you have goal setting things. So even things like gaming, like if you are doing computer gaming, video games, and all that, that gives you a rush of dopamine, and that is why sometimes it can be addictive also, because you get a false target. But if it is done consciously and if it is engaged productively, then it is fine. Dopamine is also received if you are involved in alcohol abuse. You also get shots of dopamine if you look at your phone too much, which is why when you get likes on Facebook, you get likes on Instagram, or if you get text messages, if you hear the sound of the text messages, uh, it engages your target sense. That means you are reaching more people. That means you are more popular, and because of that you get dopamine. Now serotonin. So serotonin, as I mentioned, is the pride chemical. So if you get rewards, if you get uh, some matter of pride, wherever you get some kind of an acknowledgement, you get serotonin. uh, the difference between the first two and serotonin and oxytocin is that the first two, that is E and D, are selfish happy chemicals. Like you need to do something that is for yourself. Excuse me. Yeah. So I was saying, as I was saying, these are selfish, positive or selfish happiness chemicals, where you are involved in, like if you do jogging, if you are going for jogging, then you yourself go for jogging and you receive endorphin rush. You receive an endorphin rush. For dopamine, if you set some targets and you achieve those criteria, those targets, then you get the dopamine rush. But serotonin and oxytocin are social chemicals. If somebody in your community, somebody in your society gets an award, even then you feel proud. If today an Indian is the CEO of Google, we feel happy. If an Indian is heading Microsoft, we feel happy. If somebody from our district becomes opens a company that becomes big and famous, we feel happy. When we get a reward, then the people around us, our family members, relatives, friends, they feel happy. So this is how serotonin is a social chemical, and which is also why it is one of the chemicals that is like the negative side of it now. It is engaged negatively or engaged unproductively in society by throwing products in your face, by throwing the pride factor products in your face. Like if today you don't have an iPhone, then you are worthless. If today you have an iPhone, then you are a status symbol. So that is why you get a shot of serotonin when you buy an iPhone. But when you buy that iPhone, that shot of serotonin lasts not very long, because very soon you realize what you have done, what you could have done with that money and resources. Similarly, if you buy a new pair of shoes which are very flashy, and a lot of people say wow for that, or if a lot of people look at those shoes, then again the same thing, you get bursts of serotonin. But again, the moment you are alone and the society part of it fades away, um, somewhere you realize that the shoes that you have bought, were not really worth it. Like, I'm just buying shoes for public acceptance and for the public reaction. So serotonin can be misused in that manner. Then you have oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is the family chemical. It is the chemical that we it is now studied that the reason why the bonding between dogs and human beings is so high is because, or rather, it is strengthened to this degree because when you look into a dog's eyes, when you are not experiencing cortisol, when you are not experiencing fear, at that time, if you like dogs, then oxytocin is released. You can actually relate with dogs. And oxytocin is not just released in your brain, it is released in the dog's brain also. So that is why that bonding occurs. Oxytocin is highest during or immediately after childbirth. It is what overcomes, postpartum. Like once the baby is out in the world, then there is sometimes a feeling of anxiety. There is sometimes a feeling of fear and so on. Like there is a very overwhelming rush of emotion, and that is stabilized by oxytocin. So and also things like when you help somebody, this is also when oxytocin is released. So if suppose somebody drops their books and you pick them up for them, oxytocin is released in that person as well as in you. And if anybody is seeing this kindness happening, then also oxytocin is released. So things like random acts of kindness, if you help out somebody just out of the way, like if you're say walking down the street and if there is somebody who is pulling a cart and they have to pull it over a bump, and they are looking around for help but they don't know who to ask and how to ask, if you help them do that, it gives you a rush of oxytocin, and it gives him or her a rush of oxytocin too. Then you have cortisol. So, like serotonin and oxytocin, cortisol is also a social chemical. Now, why is understanding cortisol so important? Is because being a fear chemical, it is ingrained in our biological system, and it is one of the most important chemicals which drove us to evolution, so to speak. Um, but since it is one of these important factors, it is also um, it is it also a kind of controls what we feel, how we see things, and how we perceive things. So it is necessary to understand when this cortisol is acting genuinely and when is it acting, just in bursts to remind you that fear is there. So one very example of a genuine fear is obviously a fear of heights. Like when you are on the edge of a cliff, something tells you not to go over. So that is cortisol. If you are, um, if you are engaged in some activity where you know that you are dealing with a lot of risky things, you know that this is a sensible burst of cortisol. Now, when is this cortisol unreasonable? That is, you get these bursts, but there is no ground or no basis for this. Is when you are afraid to talk to someone, when you are afraid of being made fun of, when you are afraid of the things that are not tangible, when you think that you cannot talk to a certain person in this way, what leads you to believe that? What are the grounds? What are the bases? You study a series of past experiences, fine. There is a chance that that might get repeated, but then that means you have already experienced it. So if you have already experienced it, it is nothing to be afraid of. If you know a certain person is going to shout, that is going to happen. That is the ground. And when you do interact with that person and that person doesn't shout, so that means that fear was baseless. It didn't have any grounds. So, cortisol is something that needs to be analyzed intellectually now. Previously, it was necessary because it was a survival chemical against wild animals, against the night, against predators, against poison, against social structures, mistrust, and so on. But gradually, as we are evolving into a more intelligent, a more empathetic species, um, the need for it is growing lesser. Then the other substance level of self care is food. So normally we take food for granted. We eat whenever we want, we eat whatever we want. So this is something that needs to be stopped. It needs to be managed, if not stopped, at least managed. Um and at least what we eat needs to be in our control. So, in the pieces that I was reading and a little bit of research that I was doing, we need to eat foods of all the colors. So red, which means tomatoes and peppers, then orange means carrots and oranges. Yellow means everything that like yellow capsicum and dal, that is lentils and pulses. Then green is spinach, palak, broccoli, all these things. Then blue or purple means red cabbage, bangan, that is aubergine, and white and brown would mean things like cauliflower and mushrooms and so on. So, whatever you eat must be in a balanced manner according to where you live. Not just because somebody says that chia seeds are good for health or chia seeds help in weight loss, um, doesn't mean we make a mad rush for it. We should research it, uh, find out not from news pieces and blog posts, but from scientific articles, research articles, whether they are truly good for you or not. If there are, suppose, things like tulsi is good for you, but why? Why is tulsi good for you? And there is research that is being done on all these things. We just need to figure out why, and does it really concern us? If somebody says that you need to have a lot of proteins, and if you already are in India, you have a bowl full of dal every day, maybe two bowls of dal morning and evening every day, and on top of that, if you are having protein powder and whatnot, then it doesn't really make sense, because for you the protein requirement may not include protein powder. Maybe you don't even go to the gym, but just because somebody tells you that protein powder makes you more muscular and makes you strong, you start eating protein powder. But that is not how it works. We should study what is needed by our body, and do a little bit of experimentation. So for example, I being in a hostel, I have grown to like a huge variety of foods. So I used to like capsicum. I used to enjoy eating everything that had capsicum also in it. Although, like, not a big fan of it, but I didn't dislike it. But gradually, I came to know that there are days when I upset my stomach and I was trying to figure out what is the component. And then I started eliminating a certain food, certain group of foods, then again introducing them, reintroducing them, and gradually I shortlisted capsicum. So this much of experimentation all of us can do. Some of us may be allergic to ginger, some of us may be allergic to citrus foods, peanuts, and so on. So we need to be aware of what is troubling us, if something is troubling us. The next is no sugar. This is like a hard line. Sugar, refined sugar, the white sugar that we have, especially, all sugars are not very good for health, but refined sugar is basically like poison. So, sugar is basically a strong burst of energy. When during the days when we were still evolving at a continuous rate, at that time fruits were used a lot to get bursts of energy. So if you want to go for hunting, or if you want to walk for long or something like that, and you need that burst of energy, you would need sugar. But today, what sugar does is it excites your system, and it gives you this certain a sudden burst of energy. It burns in your body, and then the moment the sugar is over, then the body doesn't come back to ground state. It goes beyond that and comes back to a state where you need rest. So, which is why those of you who have probably never quit sugar in your life, leave it for 1 week and see the difference. Within 1 week, you may not notice the difference, but after the seventh, eighth day, when you do consume sugar, you'll realize you'll feel more lethargic, you will feel more slow, you will feel more lazy, and so on. So this is because it burns the energy in your body. Sorry, it burns to create energy in your body, which lasts for a very short time, which is why it is very addictive, and it has now been proven that it engages the same parts of the brain which get engaged when you consume cocaine. So it is as addictive and as bad as that. But we don't have any laws or any regulations against sugar. And in fact, we consume them almost on a daily basis. So, understanding sugar, understanding salt, understanding these basic things which have come into fashion in our society as something that is, this has to be there in your diet kind of a thing. We need to re-study them, we need to re-understand them and experience them, how our body responds to them. So this is a once in a while thing. Like once you understand what is needed by your body, obviously you don't need to do it every time. Another place where self care happens through food is cooking together. So have days when the entire family cooks together. Somebody is mashing the potatoes, somebody is cooking something, somebody is cutting something. So everybody is involved in a certain series of activities, and that is how the food is cooked together. And cook mindfully. Enjoy every sensation, enjoy every aspect of it. How does it feel? What is the texture? As you start cooking, what is the variation in smell? What was the color before you cooked it? What is the color after you cooked it? What are the sounds that are there during cooking? How does the heat feel? Everything. So cook mindfully. Be aware of what you feel. Be aware of the sensations. If as somebody raised the point of fear and anxiety, so if you light the gas, do you feel fear every time? Do you feel a jump in your heart every time, or nowadays it is just flat? So experience that sensation, understand how you feel whatever you're doing, in whatever you're doing. Then the next is eat mindfully. So whenever we are eating something, whenever we are chewing something, how do you have to chew it? How does it feel? What does it smell like? When you taste something, is it just the taste or is it the smell also? Does it, act together to create that experience, to create that sensation? So eat mindfully. What is the color? So recently I came to know that for Maharashtrian thalis, like the traditional way how it would be done in weddings, like big weddings, you would have everything arranged in your plate beforehand. And that was because the food was not just a decorative thing. Everything on the plate was there for a reason, and everything was arranged in the series that you eat this first, then this, then this, then this, and then you end with a piece of lemon, so that the lemon balances the sugar craving by the end of your meal. So even in the foods, you have a variation of things from say red to yellow to white. So that red creates more hunger, more craving, and then you move to yellow, which is nutrition, which needs proper digestion by your body. So the craving leads to proper digestion, and then you have white, which is also digestive, and then you have yellow, which ends the meal. Yellow, matlab the lemon, which ends the meal. So even the plate arrangement is something that has value, has some sense behind it, some intelligence and reason behind it. So this is also involved in self-care. See how, like in our traditional practices, self-care was like in our lifestyle, whatever you do had self-care in it. So this is something that you experience and feel directly. So I just want to, before we move to this, and I explain a little bit about this. I wanted to ask whether any of you have any stories where things that we used to do you feel had an element of self care in it? Is there something that you do on a daily basis which suddenly clicked that, yes, this is what contributes to why I am happy?
Yeah, excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Happiness means some activity which you are speaking about. So it's about writing. I write poems sometimes when I feel happy, and not about myself, about someone special or some anything, like anything I want to write. So when I write some poems, that time I feel happy.
Hmm.
So that is an activity which gives me self care also. Means
Yes,
that is a thing which I enjoy.
yes, and it is very fulfilling. Writing is usually very fulfilling.
Yeah.
Anything else that you involve yourself in which you feel is amounts to health self care? Now that we have been discussing all these things. Okay, so Khushbu ma'am says when my work is finished. Okay, yes. So that gives you a dopamine rush, and that does give you a sense of fulfillment.
Yes,
Watching,
sir.
yes. So watching educational sessions. All right. So moving to this, what we refer to as, today's uh, self-care activities. So we have art-based therapy, we have dance movement therapy, we have music therapy, contact improv, drum circles. Now these, some of them or most of them are modern, like they have gained ground or they have gained popularity today, but they are actually things that have been there with us since ages. So art-based therapy is something is the way how the Gond tribes actually do their paintings anyways. The Warli tribes do their paintings anyways. Even things like our traditional arts, like batik and kalamkari and so on. Rangoli, yes. So a lot of us get involved in art in a social way. We don't just do art traditionally, like the traditional art, by ourselves to keep ourselves happy or just to produce a good art piece that can sell. We do it as a social activity which we enjoy together, and it's something that contributes to the feel, the essence, the experience of your lifestyle, your house, your society, and so on. So today, art-based therapy, you have proper workshops, proper conferences, and they charge like hell, so to speak. uh, and but you should explore this is a very interesting field, and a few people who are genuinely interested in promoting or propagating art based therapy, they have released videos which are freely available on YouTube, which you can search for them. Then you have dance movement therapy, the same thing. You basically dance in a very loose manner, like not in a what do you say, a choreographed way. You dance according to your bhav, that is your feelings and your emotions. So this turned into an art form is what we observe in say Bharatnatyam and so on, where you are expressing a sense of story, where you are expressing your intentions and your feelings through dance. The only difference is dance movement therapy is very loose, like it doesn't have specific steps, but Bharatnatyam have has specific steps because each and everything is a representation. It has a symbolic aspect to it. Now coming to music therapy, so in there are in all these fields, it's very varied, and everyone does it in a different way. Everyone propagates it in a different way. So, for example, music therapy can be as simple as standing among a circle of drums and having letting the drums play and just sitting in the center and listening to all the music. It can be just going to a concert, which is very peaceful, and it can be going to a rock concert, which is very energetic, any of this, or it can be being a part of the instrument. So, one of the music therapies that I happened to witness had a music therapy bed, and the bed itself was a resonant chamber, the sound box that you have in instruments like guitars and so on. So this bed itself was acting as the sound chamber, and then you had instruments around you which would amplify and would vibrate the chamber, and you would be lying on the bed and the vibrations course through your body, and this causes a sense of healing. This causes a sense of this causes the experience, which counts as the music therapy. So that is one way of looking at music therapy. Then you have contact improv. So contact improv is very similar to dance movement therapy, but where in dance movement therapy you are usually not usually, like you can be alone or dancing with someone or whatever. In contact improv you usually are with somebody. So yeah, videos for these are easily available on YouTube. It's not very easy to explain them in words, but you can take a look in the videos. Drum circles is something that is relatively easier to explain, and this is by far my favorite form of this self care, because this can be turned into a social initiative in several ways. So drum circle is basically okay. So I can maybe take this in the next slide because I have a picture about it in the next slide. Yeah, anyone here has been a part of drum circles or any of these that I mentioned before? Has anyone been a part of art-based therapy, dance movement therapy, music therapy, contact improv? Okay, you've been in a drum circle once. Can you describe your experience with for everyone?
Yeah, the drum circle was a lot of fun. I think it was also kind of very energizing, from what I
Mm-hmm.
remember. Relaxing, energizing, yeah. And there was also people dancing and all then eventually. So it was quite like recreational and
Right.
rejuvenating in a way. And this dance movement therapy also I've been to some one or two trial classes. So it's quite like loose and like what you're saying and emotive, and they do some psychological exercises along with that thing. So yeah, it's good. I mean,
Mm-hmm. So you feel good out of it after it, and you feel fulfilled again after it.
see, I was also experimenting. So
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know about the dance therapy. I find my yoga more fulfilling eventually. But yes, I can see the value in it for some things or for loosening up and all that.
So these are something like yeah. So I share that um, understanding with you. Even for me, some of these are some things that I can very much relate to, and some of them are things that I don't relate to at all. So again, self care is like you obviously experiment to get there, but then it doesn't mean that just because there is a self care activity, that activity has to be something that caters to your needs. So we need to find out what works for us. So even in my case, for me, drum circles works a great deal because of the reasons I'll just share with you in some time. But things like dance movement therapy and music therapy, contact improv, it's not my like it's not something that I can relate to. Um but it can be the other way around for other people. Some person may relate very much with art based therapy, not with any of the others. Some person may relate with all of them, and so on. So these are again practices which we need to figure out where we stand on it, where what we understand, and what we can involve ourselves in. So coming back to drum circles. So drum circles is basically sitting in a circle. Usually you have these drums, what you refer to as a djembe. So djembe is DJEMBE. I have like 10 of them in my room right now. So djembes are African drums, traditionally from West Africa, and they are very simple instruments. If you play them at the center, it is different. If you play them at the edges, it sounds different, but it is just one drum. And the beauty of this drum is you can't go wrong with it. So if you play tabla, so you have to know how to play the tabla. If you play, say, dhol, dholak, or if you play bongo, if you play a drum set. So all of them need a certain sense of knowledge, a certain sense of adeptness, like skill while playing it. A djembe is something that you can start from scratch. So that is the best part of it, and which is also one of the reasons why it is the most popular instrument in drum circles. So you sit in a circle and you play the drums, and when you start playing, you are basically engaging the most primal and the most ancient aspect of the human being, which is the heartbeat. So, since the time we have been born with a rhythm. We experience drums, we experience rhythm since the time we are born, and we experience it through our heart. We experience it through the mother's heart while we are in the womb. And as we come out, we experience it throughout the world. So everything has a certain sense of rhythm in it. Everything has some kind of a tempo in it. Everything has some kind of a, an ongoing feel to it, which is how we come to know that things are going ahead. So, for example, the clock, the machines that are around us, and so on, everything. So, this is what we are engaging here. And through this rhythm, through these drums, we express what we feel, we share what we feel, and um, this is reflected back at us through others' drums. It is shared into an open space, so you get the feeling of contributing to a community. And along with this, the person who is at the center listens to all this and feels in a way connected with everyone who is playing the drums around him or her. And which is why a lot of people, if possible, share your experience now. Okay, so I have several experiences of drum circles, and which is why 10 drums are lying in my room right now. Um, so, this is something that I want to introduce in my school also very soon. Um, so, if you are in a drum circle, there comes a time when you are so much in sync with everyone else that if somebody else starts playing a different rhythm, invariably you start joining into that rhythm while contributing with your uniqueness, with your identity. And if you start playing a different rhythm, you can be 100% sure that even the person you dislike the most, if they are in the same drum circle, they will also contribute to your rhythm. So that is the unifying and at the same time respect that diversity gets in a drum circle. So this is what a drum circle feels like. And there are corporate drum circles also where we have these activities at a corporate level, which is also something that I got certified for a few years back, where if you have a drum circle in a corporate, you fix an intention, you fix uh, an outcome of it, and then you play rhythm games, you have a drum circle, a healthy drum circle, and quite often these things come out into the circle, and once they are shared in the circle, it is for the circle to hold it together, it is for the circle to protect it and preserve it. So, for example, if you play a rhythm game and you don't have to instruct them too much, you can just facilitate the circle in a certain way where all of them find their footing and they share their experiences. Somewhere in that system, whatever has been the target of the corporate drum circle comes out anyways. Things like team building, things like sync with each other, things like miscommunication, all these things come out into the circle, and they are very easily tackled by the drum circle itself. Because in this drum circle, in this experience, somewhere you feel you are communicating with other people and you are communicating with them without all the confusion of words, confusion of language, confusion of culture, religion, society, your presuppositions, preoccupations, and so on. You are communicating very purely and very basally, which is why the intention, tone, and everything reaches out in a very pure way. And then, if you do this on a regular basis, like a monthly basis or a weekly basis or something, there comes a time when the team becomes entrained. So, this is a term that this is something that quite a few people who have involved themselves in drum circus uh, share. So entrainment is at one point of time you will reach that stage. So this is one of the experiences that I also had. I took a short drum circle for a group, and we had another session after that where even I was a participant. And all of us went for that session, and one person just started banging the table, like very simply. Another person joined in, another person joined in, and then we had a drum circle on the table in till the time we were waiting for the facilitator of the next session to arrive. So we had reached that quality, that sense of entrainment where all of us knew what is happening, all of us reflected back with what was happening, and we contributed to the rhythm even when we felt like there was no rhythm. So that is how magical a drum circle is. Other than that, other ways you can practice self-care is through other simpler instruments. So I have something called a kalimba and a mouth organ. So these are things that are not too costly, and a mouth organ is like under 2000, like 1500,000 max, a good one. And you can buy this online, and these are also instruments which you can almost never go wrong with. So kalimba, mouth organ are like, pianos can be a bit complicated, and guitar can be a bit complicated because you have different scales, different notes, and so on. But a kalimba and a mouth organ are very simple instruments, like the djembe. Then you have other activities like permaculture and mud buildings. So permaculture is when you look at agriculture not just as a mass produce of certain crops, but when you look at agriculture in terms of a connection to the earth, how the earth gives you things and how you need to give something back. So it's like a cycle. So there are permaculture workshops also. A lot of them are available, and there is a lot of information on it online also. Then mud buildings, cork buildings, this is again gained importance. So there was a time when, like a brief time in the middle, when people used to laugh at people who use cow dung on buildings and so on. Today, once again, they are gaining importance. Once again, people are realizing the importance of plastering your walls with cow dung, the effect of it, and the strengths of it. Then there are social initiatives. So wherever you have these kind of experiences where you are contributing to the society in a certain way. So if you feel that the best way to spend your Sunday mornings is by going to um clean up drives, clean a river, clean a lake, clean your school, and so on, where you can involve yourself in activities which are making some kind of a change through something very simple. Like, yes, teaching in underprivileged schools and all that is fulfilling. It is something that really contributes to society. But it's not that simple. There are lots of ways things can go wrong there. If you don't have the right content, if you yourself are not a cup that can share, so to speak, then that can be a problem for both you and the person you are educating. So it is very necessary to every now and then involve yourself in social activities where things are simpler. Like, for example, cleanup drives. How wrong can you go in picking up trash and putting it in the bin? So involve yourself in these kind of activities. Painting schools is something that you can do as a group experience. Then going to forests, going and being in the middle of nature. So dragonfly meets is something that I am actively involved in, as I mentioned, as I showed the picture in the beginning. There's a group of people who we actually had one of the organizers here, Dr. Pankaj Kopade, who is an avid dragonfly enthusiast who studies conservation, who shares the knowledge, and is also recruiting citizen scientists in dragonfly conservation and study. So he shared his experiences with us on what he does and what these dragonfly meets are. So we can, if you just check on that episode, you will get more details on it. So he and a few of his friends, they have these dragonfly meets, which are annual, which is usually in this time, like September, October, where we go in forest, we spend some time in the forest, we study the biodiversity of dragonflies there, and this leads to a lot of citizen science data which contributes to a global level of research, at least on dragonflies. And in this journey, people who are interested, so we have a mix of people. Like I have I'm that way a biotechnologist. Dr. Pankaj Kopade was actually a senior of mine in the university, so he is also a biotechnologist. But still, this is something that anyone can get involved in. It is not an exclusive affair where you need people only who have studied zoology or are into dragonfly conservation professionally. We have people who are photographers, we have people who are bikers, we have people who are who just show up, who are just interested in what we are doing and then join us. And they don't even have a camera or a binoculars, they just borrow the ones that are already there. So anyone who has an interest in this can just join in. So yeah, that is these are all the examples that I had. If you would like to share something that you have experienced, or if you would like to add to this, you are welcome. So I just wanted to end with this question. So whenever you feel that you are feeling overwhelmed, whenever you feel that things are getting out of hand, just remember this question: what is important? Thank you very much. And we are open for questions.